Well, we spent time with Curtis McGee, Robert Alexander, Quincy Wilson. Now let's go to a head coach. Yes, a head coach that has coached both at the prep side and is now on the college side of football here in West Virginia. And let's start here. He was the head football coach at Martinsburg, where during his tenure won a whopping 8 state championships from 2010 to 2013, 2016 to 2019. And during that span as well, won 56 straight games as well. Unbelievable run. We'll dive into that. And it's just been unreal just seeing what he's done. Won over 300 games in 32 seasons as Martinsburg's head coach. Also spent time as East Hardy's head coach as well. 53 playoff wins as well from East Hardy and Martinsburg combined. He is now the head football coach at Concord University. So without further ado, let's dive right into episode 4 of West Virginia Sideline Talk. And as always, before we begin, you can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast. Subscribe to the podcast as well on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. Give us a rate, give us a review. What have you thought so far? What could be changed? I'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, let's introduce the 20th head coach at Concord University, Dave Walker. Coach, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So how is everything so far? Let's start with the spring. Just before we dive into everything else, how'd the spring go for you all?
I thought we had a good spring, a good off season. Our guys, worked hard in the weight room and then this is since even though I've been here 2 calendar years, this has actually been our first true year because of COVID. No one was here the first year I was here. So, and we didn't have a season in 20. So just having a normal off season, I thought was good. I thought our guys worked real hard. Spring practice went well. I thought we had some young guys made some improvements, and I thought we got some questions answered in areas of need. So overall, I thought it was very productive, and I was pleased with what went on.
You talked about the COVID side of things, and it's definitely been difficult for everybody. But during that first season for you, how difficult was it just to, one, get to know your guys since you were a brand new head coach, but 2, just trying to establish the foundation of what you're wanting to do down there in Concord?
Well, it was tough, but everyone was going through it. So when I get the job, I guess January the 6th was my first official start date. And I'm not here a couple of months, and they send everybody home and shut everything down. So I'm kind of sitting here by myself for a while, which was difficult. It's hard to build something when you don't have anyone here to build it with. But we dove in, and once we got our guys back in the fall, obviously we didn't have a season in the fall of 20, but we were able to do some practice, kind of like a spring practice in the fall, and get some things, sort of a foundation built. And then we tried to play in the spring of 21. We ended up only playing 1 game because of COVID. But then we get, fast forward this past fall, then we kind of have somewhat of a normal year, with the exception of dealing with the testing and the quarantines and things of that nature. But hopefully that stuff is almost behind us. I think it's always going to be there a little bit, but I think we got through it as best we could, like everyone else.
Okay, so take me from this standpoint then. From the beginning, whenever it was your first day on the job, to now as we record this on Wednesday, May the 4th, what's the biggest thing that you've learned during the span of such a short amount of time as Concord's head coach?
Well, I think the question I get asked a lot was, what's the difference between coaching at the high school level and coaching at the collegiate level? And I think that goes along this reign. The thing I've noticed, the biggest difference is at this level, there's so many different moving parts that you have to deal with. There's so much more involved in putting together and maintaining a team. When you deal with the college itself, I mean, you've got to deal with admissions, the NCAA, housing, financial aid. It goes on and on and on before you can even put a team on the field. You have some things that you got to deal with in high school with academic issues and stuff, but at this level, there's just so many people coming and going, and there's just a lot of different moving parts and that all have to come together for it to work. So it's been quite a learning experience, but I really enjoy what I'm doing, and the recruiting aspect of it is obviously your lifeline when it comes to this level.
Along the lines of recruiting, the transfer portal has also been something where it's a growing monster. It's a growing aid for some people as well. How have you guys adapted to the transfer portal lately?
I think we're doing it like a lot of people. I mean, we tried to bring in we brought in about a dozen mid-year guys, transfer guys through the portal, and we're strictly at this point in the year, we're strictly looking in the portal. But we still want to recruit high school players and have a base there. But the one thing about the portal, and people will agree or disagree. I'm in favor of it. I think if someone's not happy where they're at, I think they should be allowed to go wherever they want to go. Obviously, I mean, coaches can leave and come and go as they please. I don't see why players can't. But when you deal with when you bring high school kids, there's such a learning curve for those young men when they get to this level, because a lot of them, it's the first time away from home. They don't know how to manage their time properly. So a lot of them will struggle. And that's been my experience. We've had a lot of guys struggle a little bit just with time management and academics. Whereas if you can bring in a little older guy that's a veteran that's went through that already, and a lot of them are very appreciative to get a second opportunity. So, and a lot of times guys do make the wrong decision on where to go, and they go to schools for different reasons, and a lot of them isn't the right one. So, and also we've had guys here leave and go into the portal as well. And I'm just a firm believer that life's too short for you not to be happy. And if you think you can be happier somewhere else, then more power to you.
Okay, so go back to what you had said at the beginning of that statement. You guys are still wanting to recruit high school kids, but at the same time, you got to find the experienced guys in the portal, trying to figure out who's played the most games amongst that pool of individuals. But how do you go about balancing the recruiting side of things for high school athletes along with experienced guys in the portal as well?
Well, I think a lot of it is position based, where there's specific needs. I mean, for us, we're not established. We're trying to turn the program. We're trying to rebuild. I think we've laid a good foundation, and I think this past season we were really competitive. We were really close to winning a bunch of games, but for us, we're not at the luxury. We want to bring in guys that can play for us right away and can help us. And if we were in a situation where we are really successful, and I think you can be more selective with what you're doing, but we still want to have. I don't want to say a 50-50, but I'm not sure what the split is. I still think that you're probably in the long run, you still want to get more high school guys. And I think the transfer guys can come in is where you have immediate needs. I mean, it's hard for an 18-year-old kid to come in at any level, at the collegiate level, and play and be an impact player. I mean, I think there are guys that can do that, but especially when you're dealing with the bigger guys up front, I think you really want to look to guys. And offensive, defensive linemen are really hard to find. Tight ends are hard to find. So I think you try to get those guys wherever you can get them, and then at the same time, if you've got the financial means to get young players who can develop and are willing to sit and wait. But that's the thing. A lot of guys don't want to really wait. They want immediate gratification. So it's a fine line that you walk. But I think every program's different. And I think it depends on what your makeup of your team is and what your needs are.
Okay, so you're on a recruiting trip. Let's walk through a hypothetical. You're on a recruiting trip. You go into somebody's house, or you sit down with them, wherever that may be. What goes into that conversation? What do you try and accomplish during that one-on-one interaction, or maybe the interaction between the student athlete and the parents? What do you try and sell at that point?
Well, I always say this, and I think when you go to pick a school, I think you have to pick the people. I don't think you pick the four walls. I mean, I know a lot of people get attracted to nice, shiny facilities, or whether they're a Nike or an Under Armour, whatever the case may be. But I think at the end of the day, you have to pick people that you're comfortable with, people that is going to care about you, and people that you're going to get along with, because there's nothing worse than going to a job and working with someone that doesn't like you or you don't. So, and everyone's experienced that. So I always, it always is something I talk about. And I think, after years and years of being around, whether it's at the high school level, wherever, I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to relationships. It still comes down to people and surrounding yourself with good people.
Talk about the player development side of things. Is that more time doing skill work? Is that more time doing weightlifting? What goes into that, and how in depth is that in regards to your evaluation of a player?
When I'm recruiting a player,
Just either whenever you're recruiting a player or whenever they're playing for you.
well, like when we have guys here, guys that are in our program, I mean, we're allocated so many hours per week for skill development that we can work on specific drills and being in the weight room. So for me, I've always been a big weight room guy. So we really are emphasize our strength and conditioning part of it, as I think everybody does. And then we also throw in skill development for each position. So each position coach will have an allocated time that he'll meet with his position, and they'll do sports or position specific drills and just try to work on the things that they need to work on to get better. So sometimes it comes down to an individual thing, but at the end of the day, it's about guys, showing up on time, putting the work in, and trying to get better every day.
You had mentioned how you guys are rebuilding the foundation, or rebuilding however you want to go about that. You guys are rebuilding. What goes into that, and how do you go about accomplishing what you're trying to rebuild?
Well, I think a lot of people use the word culture a lot, and they throw the word culture around, and sometimes it's hard to get a clear definition of what that is. For us, we just want our guys to concentrate on getting better. We need to recruit better players. We need to recruit bigger, faster, and stronger players. So when I first got here, I mean, I really had to flip the roster somewhat and bring in guys that I think fit my philosophy and the things that I feel that's important. And unfortunately, in college football, there is a business side to it. When you talk about scholarships, when you talk about things that financial aid and financial commitments to players and to your program, you have to make sure you're able to work within that framework of what you have to do and what you have to accomplish. But for me, I felt like we needed to, and I'm not saying anything bad about anyone before me, because I think all those people did a good job. It's just, I think a lot of times you have to be at the right place at the right time. And for me, I felt like there were some areas we needed to get strong on and emphasize on. And I think we're headed in that direction. And I feel good about where we're at right now. But again, it is college football, and everybody's got scholarships. Everybody's got good players. So everybody has to prepare.
I want to talk about two players you have on your team. We're going to talk about them individually, but whenever you left, you picked up a couple guys from Martinsburg, including one of the top prospects in his class, Gerard Bowie, 5'8", 160-pound wide receiver for you. When you look at Gerard, how much has he grown since he left the scene at the high school level?
He's really done a nice job for us. Unfortunately, he got injured week 4. He probably would have had an all-conference year. He really was doing well. He's very talented, and he does well in the classroom, and he does everything we asked him to do. So been very pleased with what he's done for us. And he's still got a few years left, and I think he's, barring injuries, I think he's going to have a great career here for us.
Another guy that you got from Martinsburg as well is Elijah Banks. Last year, you pretty much had an established quarterback, but when you look at him, what needs to happen for him to try and get more of the spotlight? Because it seems like Jack Mangle last year did a great job, went 251 of 141 for 61%, over 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns. What does Elijah need to do to continue to improve?
Well, now, and Jack has got 2 more years left.
Right.
Now, Elijah's no longer he's no longer in our program. He's entered the portal. And,
okay.
Yeah. So, but no, Elijah is a good player, and he's a kid that I've known for a long time, and I'm always going to be very supportive of what he wants to do. So I wish him nothing but the best.
Gotcha. So, okay, let me ask you on a much broader scale then. You've established a pipeline, it seems like, with having Martinsburg kids, because last year's roster, you had 5 student athletes come from Martinsburg. When you look at that, how does that kind of help you just continue to establish something? Because they know what you're trying to accomplish and they've played for you already. Does that make your job a lot easier whenever you go about recruiting, because you know that there's like a solid pipeline from Martinsburg to Concord?
Well, there used to be. There's not anymore. I didn't get any of them this year. If I could keep them from going to Shepherd or walking on at West Virginia, I could probably get a lot more of them. Now, I've obviously got a good relationship with those guys, and I care about those guys, and I've always tried to look out for those guys and bring them with me. And some of them have come down and did really well. Some of them have come down and realized that maybe school wasn't the right fit for them. But either way, they've had opportunities. So, and we'll continue to try to get those guys down here. But at the end of the day, whether it's, coming with me or each kid, I want every kid to do what's best for them. And we make sure that they do that. And if I can help any of those guys, I will. And whether it be come here or go somewhere else, I obviously would help them.
You had just mentioned something that I want to ask you about. You had mentioned how a lot of the players, you didn't get any of the players from Martinsburg this past year because they either went to Shepherd or WVU. But at the same time, there's a lot of difficulty with that because at Martinsburg, you were pretty much the alpha dog. You're one of the more accomplished head coaches in West Virginia high school football history. But now at the collegiate level, you're having to battle a lot of these different colleges within the MEC, and then you just mentioned Shepherd and WVU and Marshall for that matter as well. How difficult is that going from such a high level of status to going up against other people and trying to battle for these other kids as well?
Well, I'm definitely, I like a challenge. And the reason here's the thing. I could have stayed at Martinsburg, finished out there for the next 10 years and, rode out into the sunset or whatever they may say. But for me personally, I think change is good. I think you have to challenge yourself and you have to grow as a person. And I feel like I feel like I'm a lot better coach and a lot better individual having come down here than what I was before. And I think in any job we do, whether it be coaching, teaching, in the business world, whatever, I think you have to challenge yourself. And I really love what I'm doing. And I feel like I have learned so much and I've gotten so much better. I just feel like if you're not challenging yourself, then what's your purpose? And I was at the point in Martinsburg where I'd done everything that I could accomplish. I mean, I love it up there. All my friends are up there. I got family up there. But at the end of the day, whether it be me having to go find satisfaction and professionally or a player, they have to do, I want players to do what's best for them financially and what's best for them and their family. And if a kid can go, to West Virginia or Shepherd or somewhere else and it benefits them more than being with me, then by all means, I want them to do that. And at the same time, I think my friends, my true friends have been very supportive of what I've been doing. And I think as a professional, I think you always strive to get better. And it's kind of the way I've always looked at it. And even when I started at East Hardy and making the move to Martinsburg, I mean, it was a challenge.
Talk about Tyson Bajan, one of your former players at Martinsburg, doing tremendous things over in Shepherd right now, won the Division II National Player of the Year. When you look at Tyson's game and how far that he's come since his prep career, what just makes you so proud of just watching him continue to succeed each and every day?
Yeah, I love Tyson. Tyson's, one of my favorite guys I've been around in 30 years as a player. And, you run across guys like him very rarely. But I think something that maybe doesn't get talked about a lot with him is his work ethic. He's the player he is because of the time he put into it. Obviously he's got some physical abilities, but his work ethic and, his character and he's had to overcome adversity. And a lot of people said he wasn't good enough. I mean, I had coaches tell me, he's not good enough to play at this level. He's not good enough to play at that level. But he's a great success story. And I think his story is really just starting. And I'm proud of him and I've enjoyed watching him. And I've actually watched him a couple of times live this year. I watched some of the playoff games and he's just a great kid, great family. His whole family, they're special people. And I'm proud to be associated with them.
When you have guys like Tyson that you just mentioned, all the different tangibles that they possess, hard work, great family, great individual to be around, does that make your job easier as a head coach?
Yeah, it definitely does. Tyson was like having a coach on the field when he was in high school. And I never had to worry about him, being on time. Never had to worry about him, things off the field I didn't have to worry about. And I didn't have to worry about him. There's some, what is disheartening sometimes is when some of your best players are the guys you got to worry about. And he definitely wasn't the case. The guy, when you got special players who take care of everything and are true leaders and true examples of what you want to set forward, it really makes your job as a coach a lot easier and makes you look a lot smarter, especially on Friday nights or Saturday afternoons.
Okay, so let's talk about your career at Martinsburg. Eight state titles with them. I mentioned the years. You amassed 300 wins while you were the head coach at Martinsburg, one of the winningest coaches in the state of West Virginia. Look back at your time at Martinsburg. Let's go macro before we go micro. Look at your time at Martinsburg. How would you best define your time with the Bulldogs?
Wow. All the relationships that I made there and all the friendships and all the people, I was always surrounded by really good people. And I think that's a key to success. You have to put yourself around people that have similar goals and that are good people that are going to make you better. And when I think about, those years, I think about all of the relationships that I had and formed with players I still talk to every week. I'm talking to somebody that played for me up there. So I think that was a special thing. The winning, we won a lot of games. I think the winning was just a result of all the other hard work that everybody put in. It wasn't all me. I mean, I had great staff. Most of my staff were kids that played for me, and I had the support of the administration and the community, and it was a total team effort.
What made those Martinsburg teams so dominant?
Well, people, we talk about the championship years, but people forget we were runners up 4 times before we ever won the first one. And I think what made the difference between what really separated us was when we got to the point of where our better athletes were really working hard and buying in. When we started opening the weight room up at 6 a.m. so the basketball players could lift. So when you get everybody doing and being on the same page and really sacrificing their time, it really means a lot more to them. When we were playing for championships in the 2000s and getting beat, and I felt like we were pretty good, but we were still missing something. And then once we got it to where our star athletes were our hardest workers, I felt like that we really got over the hump, and it really just started feeding itself. And it's a machine now. I mean, this thing is fine-tuned and it rolls, and there's a process and a system of the way that we did things. And as you can see, they've not missed a beat since I left. So, and I think it'll continue. It's just, we had something there very special, and it continues to be special. And I'm definitely proud of it, and I keep a close eye on it.
I was going to ask you, how much of your closet is Concord stuff compared to Martinsburg stuff?
Listen, I must have threw away 200 T-shirts when I moved down here. I had 22 years worth of stuff in a closet. It's slowly. I've still got a closet full of Martinsburg stuff that I just can't quite throw away just yet. I still wear it, occasionally. But it is slowly the maroon and gray is slowly starting to build up as the longer I'm here. But it's a funny question, because I've tossed with that. I give away a lot of stuff when I left too. So
now has Todd May pretty much been just coming down the hall every once in a while, just saying, "Hey, coach, here's some stuff. Just make sure it's more Concord than Martinsburg." Because I know Todd, and Todd could pretty much do stuff like that.
Todd's a great guy. He probably would give me a lot of stuff if I could actually wear it. No, it's great people here. Todd's a great coach, does a good job, and I really like the people I'm working with here. So it's been good.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Do you ever catch yourself being a player? Because you were a 2-time WVIAC conference selection as an offensive lineman. Do you ever catch yourself, being a player and being like, okay, don't do this. You got to do this if you want to be good. Does that ever come up whenever you were a coach at Martinsburg and Concord? Yeah,
I mean, I think when you transition from being a player to a coach, I think you rely on that a lot. And I think the older I got, you kind of, the old saying, the older you get, the better you were. But I think I've kind of been the opposite. I probably look back and think, man, I really wasn't that good. But you want to use I think experience is your best teacher. So I think, I don't think you have to be a good player to be a good coach. Obviously, it's 2 different things. But I think having that experience helps you when you're teaching and and I know, and I've done it at times where I'd see a kid make a mistake, and I can remember making the same mistake many years ago. So I think that helps, in the transition. But at the end of the day, the game has really evolved, and a lot of the things that we do today, we didn't do back in the '80s. So it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and now we throw the ball about every down. So I wish I could have played in the offense that we play in.
Okay, so branch out on that last part of that statement. How has the game of football grown over your whole entire coaching and even playing career, for that matter?
Well, I think with the spread offense, obviously everybody runs a spread, and I started running the spread when I was at East Hardy, somewhat as a third down system, and then when I got to Martinsburg, I expanded on when I had players like Nate Sowers and Brandon Barrett, or two. If you follow high school football, they were really special back about 20 years ago. And we went to a full time, and I think it evolved. We still used a lot of wing tee principles and a lot of blocking down, kicking out power stuff like people did with the wing tee and the wishbone and all that. And then we kind of evolved went to the inside zone, outside zone stuff, and then the duo and the gap scheme stuff. So I think if you want to stay in this business a long time, I think you have to adapt and change to the trends. I know a lot of guys, they know one thing, they're going to stick with that wing tee for their whole career. But I think you have to evolve to the type of players you have in your program. Obviously in high school and as at Martinsburg, I was blessed to have some really good athletes. So I wanted to try to take advantage of the skill set that we had. Whereas if you're at some teams, maybe like Spring Valley or somebody that's got all these big guys up front, they want to run power football. So I think you have to adapt to the personnel that you have.
Okay, I want to touch on this about Martinsburg. There was a documentary or a short episode, I guess you could say, from Uninterrupted, and it was called Addicted to Winning. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it numerous times, big fan of it. But I want to ask this question for you. When you look at coaching guys that are surrounded by a massive drug epidemic over in the Eastern Panhandle, how beneficial is it for you just to get those guys away from that and just keep them away from that and just show them the light at the end of the tunnel? Because a lot of those kids may be going something very difficult, but as a head coach and as a mentor, and even as a father figure for a lot of these players as well, how beneficial was that for you to try and keep them away from that stuff and keep them away from something that was a lot bigger than a lot of people had thought?
Well, first of all, that the drug epidemic is everywhere. It's not just isolated in the Eastern Panhandle. Now, we do get hit with it heavy. We might be on the front line, but it's an epidemic everywhere. For me, I felt like if we could provide a safe environment, a safe drug-free environment for our players and our students during the school day and during practice was a plus, and try to put them around positive people. The problem is you don't know what is going to happen after 6 or 7 p.m. And I always would tell our guys, because I was also an assistant principal and athletic director, and I did discipline for about 10 years, and I dealt with them. I saw a lot of hardship cases and dealt with a lot of things that most people probably don't want to deal with. But I always used to tell our players, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I'm going to be with the people I want to be with. And, for after 7 p.m., it's the same way. But during the school day or during the day when you're there, you need to take advantage of all the opportunities that you have, and you need to educate yourself and stay away from the things that's going to take harm to you. I mean, if you're messing with drugs, you're going to end up one of two places. You're either going to end up in jail or you're going to end up in the ground. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of both. And our deal is, I want to try to give kids the opportunity to realize that there's more to life than just being on the street or being on the street corner or slinging dope or even, using dope or drugs. And guys use football as an avenue to escape from that. And I told people, use football to help you. Don't let football use you. Use it to get an education. Use it to make something of yourself. And the guys that are able to do that, they figure it out. But unfortunately, a lot of guys get caught up
Yeah, no, I understand that part of it as well. So then, okay, so you just mentioned how you had different roles for a number of years as the AD, as the assistant principal as well, along with being the head coach of a football team as well. But put on your dad cap for a second. But you have two sons of your own. Whenever your player would come to you and you would have to put on a different hat than what you assumed between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., what was that like? If you are willing to share.
You mean as far as with my own two sons, or just any?
You can talk about them or just the players themselves trying to find you as a father figure.
I mean, well, like any player would come in. First of all, I had the relationship with their guys. I think, and I know that they knew that I cared about them, and but I also had to hold them accountable. So I would tell our guys, if you don't get in trouble at school, I don't want you in my office. Because again, I'm with the people from 7 a.m. to 7 be with. If you become one of those guys I don't want to be with, then you're not going to be with me. So I didn't have a lot of trouble with guys as far as their behavior at school, but I would deal with kids on a personal level if they had personal issues at home. If they didn't have food or they weren't being taken care of. I mean, those are things you deal with. Unfortunately, as a coach, has become more of a guidance counselor sometimes and a caregiver than a coach. And that just comes with the job. And if you're not up to that job, then you're in the wrong business. But I think you have to. I never had a kid in my program I didn't care about or I didn't like. And there's some guys you might like more than others, you gravitate towards because of whatever reason. And it not necessarily has to do with how good of a player they are. It's just their personality. But our guys always understood we were there we feed them, we fed them after school, we fed them. We take care of our guys. And my own two sons, I was probably tougher on them than I were the other kids just because I knew everybody was watching and they were under a microscope. And, one thrived in it and the other wasn't so crazy about it. But at the end, they were better for it by going through it. But I want our guys, we always talk about, a brotherhood and a family and taking care of our guys. And we want them to be cared for. We want them to feel special because a lot of times a lot of guys, that's all they have. If they didn't have football, they wouldn't be in school. And it's sad that, I feel bad for a lot of guys that don't participate in sports, whether it's football or whatever. You have to be able to do. But football, there's a place for everybody, whether you're big, little, short, tall, unathletic, whatever. There is a job and there is a place for everybody. And we tried to, I never cut a player. We always took care of everybody who wanted to be a part of our team and our program.
Okay, so I'm interested to see how you will respond to this, but I know if we were to talk about each of your 8 state championships, that's a whole podcast for itself. We could just go by game and just start talking about each game. But looking at
team was the best.
Say that again?
You want to know which team was the best?
No. Which game stands out amongst the others in regards to state championship victories?
The first one stands out because it was our first one. We'd been there 4 times, and if we'd lost the 5th one, I may have drove my truck off the bridge in the Ohio. I joked with my assistants. I don't know if I could have taken it anymore. I was right at the wit's end because I was doing everything I knew how to do, and we still hadn't won. And we won that first one. So that one obviously stands out. But, the next one, when we won in 13, they're real tight, 9-7. My son caught the game-winning touchdown. That was pretty special, watching your own son be a senior and the captain and win. But I mean, they're all hold a special place. The one game that really stands out, I think it maybe was the 17 game. We're playing Spring Valley, and they take the opening drive and knock about 9 minutes off the opening drive and score. And it's everything that went wrong for us went wrong. And, I think we muffed the opening kickoff and it was a mess, but then we come right back and score. So that was an exciting game. And then the last one was remember, it's memorable. We scored like 35 points in like 2 minutes or something crazy right from the half. And that being my last high school game at Martinsburg was special. But they're all unique and have their own place, obviously. And to be honest, I said this when I left. I said this year. I'm not one to really sit around and think about the past. So even to this day, I've not really sat down and put it in perspective and really thought about those years. I know I will at some point, but right now I'm too busy to sit around and think about the past.
I understand. No, I do understand. So you've been able to coach a plethora of collegiate talent, very high level players as well. But when you look at a guy or two that really stands out, that really embodied the Martinsburg football culture, if you could share that with us, who do you think really embodied that the most?
Probably, I've said this a few times over the years, the best player I ever coached was Nate Sowers. And that's been 20 years ago. And Nate was a Kennedy Award winner. He went on to play at West Virginia. Nate went to West Virginia as a quarterback behind Pat White, and he moved and started at receiver, and he started on defense. I mean, there's not too many guys that could do that at that level. And Nate, for us, and I always felt bad. He was a runner-up 2 or 3 times, but he never got to win a state championship. And he'd have traded all of it for a championship if you asked him. But Nate was one of those guys who was a great student, a great athlete, a great worker, he just he checked all the boxes, did everything right. He was just fun to have around. But guys like Grant Harmon really stands out for me. He reminded me a lot of Nate. Tyson, Brandon Barrett. I mean, there's just so many. I'd leave guys out, but Steve Roach was an offensive lineman I had to coach for me, and Britt Sherman. I mean, there's just so many great people that's come that I've had the pleasure to be associated with. It's I'm missing a bunch of guys, but obviously they all hold a special place and are guys that I would do anything for.
What does it mean for you to be able to coach and to continue staying in West Virginia, coaching at a high rate, and being a West Virginia native as well, because you're from Wyoming County? What does that mean for you to still be in your home state and do what you do at such a high level?
Well, I'm proud of my heritage and where I'm from. And to be honest with you, one of the main reasons I took this job was to be closer to my mother. My dad had passed away 3 years ago. Mom, I just felt like I needed to get back closer to help with her. And then my brother passed away this past fall. So, it's been one of those deals where I'm really glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm where I'm at. I'm able to help take care of her. Not that she needs me to take care of her, but, I spent a lot of years away from home and away from my family. So this gives me an opportunity to try to, help with her and repay her for everything she's done for me. So, but I'm proud of. I love the state of West Virginia. I really I live along anywhere. But I consider that my home. But I consider Pineville my home, and I think the whole state I consider as my home. So I don't have any plans to ever leave the state. But again, none of us knows what the future holds. If you'd asked me 3, 4, 5 years ago if I'd be the head football coach at Concord, I'd say, "Yeah, you're crazy." I'm going to be at Martinsburg the rest of my days. So none of us knows what the future holds. And I think you have to embrace change and be prepared, for whatever, steps in front of you.
So we talked about getting the Concord job after you left Martinsburg, but go back even further than that. When did the Martinsburg job come for you? Because you were coaching at East Hardy during that time down in Baker. When did the Martinsburg job come into the scene for you?
Well, there was a group of guys, a bunch of retired guys that belonged. They had this little club called the Martinsburg Fan Club, and these guys were retired Martinsburg guys that just loved Martinsburg High School, and they followed the athletic programs. And probably about 2 years before I got to Martinsburg, these guys were they would come to East Hardy games, and then they would call me and talk to me about coming to Martinsburg. The program, they weren't happy with their coach. Program was down, and they kind of recruited me to come there. And I told them, well, I've got a job. If it ever comes open, I'd be interested. So it did come open. It came open in '94, and I applied for the job and actually didn't get it. They hired someone else. So then this same group, kept coming around. Actually, that group didn't come around until after I didn't get it the first time. And then it came open again in 97, and I applied and got the job. And, the first year there, we were 1-9. We were bad. But we got to work pretty quick. And then the next year, we got into the playoffs. And we were in the playoffs every year after that. But I think back at those days, I mean, we really the facilities were really bad. And, we didn't have a weight room. I mean, there was just a lot of work that needed to be done. So, we dug in and went to work, and I didn't have a lot of help. But we slowly built it, and it took us a few years. But once we got things going, it just lit. The bar kept raising, and it just kept steamrolling.
I was going to say something must have flicked on for you all, because your first 2 seasons as East Hardy's head coach only won 1 game. But then after that, from the 90 season until your very last season, you only lost 22 games. I mean, that's astonishing to say the least. I mean, looking through, you coached there all of about 6-7 years after your first 2 years. So obviously they continue to buy into you. Talk about that then.
Well, I job at East Hardy, I was 22 years old, 22, 23. I was the youngest head coach in the state, and I just finished up playing at Glenville. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to work hard. And I was like a sponge. I tried to absorb and learn everything I could. The first year we were 0-10. East Hardy had only won 7 games in the whole history of the school. I think the school was like 9 years old when I got there. So they'd only won like 7 games. And I think 2 of those were against the school for the deaf. And, maybe a couple of schools are no longer in existence now. So we started out 1-19. And, I really questioned whether I'd made the right decision, as far as career-wise. I thought maybe I'd try to sell insurance or something. That third year we came back. When I got there, I started a bunch of 9th grade. I only had 2 seniors. I only had like 24 players on the team. And I started a bunch of 9th graders. So those guys, we got them in the weight room, started working. And then by the third year, I think we went 8-2. And then, we started winning a bunch of games. But it's still, the thing there was, the most kids I ever had in the program was like 30. And then we would end up playing teams, like Valley Wetzel and Sarita Canova, and these teams that have like 50 kids in single A. We really just didn't have the numbers to be really competitive at the end of the year. So, but I liked it there. I got a lot of good friends still there. And then, there was a couple of job opportunities that came open while I was there, but then I just kind of, I kind of waited on the right one. And then, I was able to, to get to Martinsburg, but, I learned so much those years, and I still have really good friendships from those years. And the funny thing, those guys, I keep a tab on them too. And those guys have been really successful. And when they were playing for championship stuff, it's funny because a lot of the kids that played for me, their kids are now playing there now. So I really feel old, but it's fun. I can watch those guys, and the kids of kids that I coached are now playing. And I feel really old. But I started young.
Well, I was going to ask you, does it feel like you've been coaching for so long?
No, not really. I think as you get older, you go through different phases, and I think I'm at the point now to where, I was really one of those rah-rah guys. And, halftime I would throw stuff, yell and scream. I was a complete idiot at times, and I think back, and just because I really didn't know maybe what to tell them, I'd scream and yell, and they'd get scared and they'd play harder. And as you get older, you start realizing that's really, you become more of a teacher. And I think once you've done it, and once you've had kids or you've coached your kids and you've been around, I think you look at it more as now, I don't want to say in a parental way, but you take a really interest in kids, and it becomes so much more about football. It really, and I'm at a point in my life where, I'm blessed to be where I'm at, and I've got a good job, but, it doesn't define me. If I get to the point to where I feel that I'm not doing a good job or I'm not useful or I'll move on down the road and I'll do something else. But I really enjoy being around the people I'm around. I enjoy my players. I enjoy the recruiting part of it. And I think as you get older, you put things in perspective that you realize what's really important. And at the end of the day, I know at the college level, you get paid to win games, so I'm not downplaying that, but I think the games become an afterthought of what really is important. That's preparing people and preparing them to be successful in life.
Look at your career leading up to this upcoming season, and then obviously in the future as well. When you've officially announced your retirement and you're like, okay, it's time for me to do something else other than coach football, how do you want to be defined, or how do you want to be remembered? Because everybody's, like you just said, everybody's going to remember the wins, the championships, and that. But you mentioned how you want to keep those relationships going. How do you want to be remembered after you put up your hat?
I'd hope that every place I've been, that they say, I left it better than I found it. That's always been my goal. But I want the guys that played for me to, I hope they all know that I cared about them, and I think they know that. And for me, that's the most important thing. I get a kick out of guys who would show up there, bring their families by the coach's office. I'd have guys stop in every week. They bring their kids or their family. They come by and say hi, or just pick their head in the door and say, "Hey, Coach, how you doing? Good to see you." That's my reward, and that's probably what I take most from it is the relationships. But trophies and all that stuff. At the end of the day, they all collect dust. But I think the friendships and relationships, that's what really lasts from what we do.
Couple more, and again, your expertise as a head coach should never go unnoticed. But in your eyes, what makes a quality young head coach at any level of football?
I think you have to be willing to do a little extra. The downside to this job is it requires a lot of time if you want to do it well. I don't think you ask, if you're a head coach or a young head coach, I don't think you ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. I think you have to get your hands dirty. There's nothing wrong with that. But it all comes down to putting in time, putting in quality time. But you also have to balance, if you have a family. There's times that you can be in the office, there's times you need to be home. And I think you also have to have a really good balance between that, and you have to have support. But if you neglect one for the other, then you're not going to be good in either one. So you have to find that balance, whatever that may be for you.
Who helped you find your balance?
My biggest influence on me was not a coach. It was my father. Just because I watched his work ethic and what he did and how he conducted himself, I think really taught me a lot about people. Because at the end of the day, coaching is about dealing with people. Same as a teacher, as an administrator, it all comes down to how you interact with people. So I think my dad was the person that I modeled and tried to be, and tried to emulate him, the way he dealt and how he interacted with people, the way he did things. As far as coaches, I played for Frank Vincent at Glenville. He was tough, old school guy. He was an influence. Glenn McNew, longtime Mullins and Morgantown head coach, was a big influence on me as a young coach. I spent time with him. Me and him were friends. But there was a lot of guys around the state that I just would, I would study and see how they're doing things. So I think, we all, we beg and steal and borrow from everybody. And I think all coaches, and I'm an open book too. I have a lot of young coaches that I've gotten with that I go over and I try to help, because I didn't invent any of the stuff that we do. I've taken it and meshed it with my own personal style. But I think in this business, sometimes coaches let egos get in the way, and I think you have to. It's a small profession, and it's a profession that's really under attack. I worry about especially high school football and coaches, and it's hard to dealing with parents and dealing with other things. it really, a lot of guys question whether they should do it because it's really, it can be a tough job and you don't get paid a lot and you don't get a lot of reward for it. So I try to help everyone that I can in any way that I can.
Along those lines, what advice would you give somebody that is dealing with all that outside noise and just the trials and tribulations that they go through early on?
One thing I always, and it's tough to do, but one thing I always try to tell myself, I try not to worry about stuff I have no control over. Control your controllables. I don't sit around and worry about what somebody thinks about me or what people are saying about me online. You have to just block out all the noise. And if you know you're doing what's right, you stay true to your course, stay true to yourself, and no one else is walking in your shoes but you. And it's easy for people to sit back behind a computer screen or behind a phone and be brave or say a lot of things about people, but you can't worry about that. People are going to have opinions, and most of them aren't good ones. So I don't take advice from people or worry about people that I wouldn't take advice from. So you just control what you can control and don't worry about what you can't. I know that sounds pretty vague, but that's kind of that's what I would say.
No, I think that's a well thought out answer. I agree, and I do agree with you on a lot of different levels. So, but go back to something you had just said in that as well. The social media side of things has definitely impacted coaching and players and administrations, all that stuff in between. When you look at social media from the time that let me say it like this then. How much of a factor does social media go into your recruiting for a player now that you are a head coach at the collegiate level?
I mean, it's huge. We do a majority of what we do is through social media on Twitter. I mean, I get bombarded with DMs from kids sending me their film and emails. So that's a huge part, especially with COVID going on. We weren't allowed to get out on the road. So it's kind of changed how you recruit. And you've got a recruit right at your fingertips. But you talk about social media, which is funny. Years ago, it's been 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I used to tell my staff at Martinsburg, listen, if there's something on social media, something bad about me or the program or whatever, I don't want to hear about it. Don't tell me about it. I'll just get mad. I don't want to hear about it. And so back when Tailgate Central, it first came out, and some of these other sites that I can't remember what it was called before that, West Virginia Preps or something. Guys would get on there and just blast people. They didn't have to put their name, and it was just. And I wouldn't get on it. Guys would want to come in and show me, hey, see what they're saying about it. I said, I don't want to see it. It's nonsense. If somebody's not going to put their real name on there, then it has no validity, and I don't care. So I don't care what people say. So that's part of blocking out that noise, because people would get on there and say some really, really nasty stuff about people, me included, to say stuff about me. And I'm just like, you can't pay any attention to that. I said, so as far as social media for us now, it is strictly, it's how we communicate with recruits. It's how we communicate with our own players. So it's crucial. I can remember the days when I would have to drive 4 and 5 hours to trade film with people, and back in those days where you had the VHS tapes, and I'm going and we're meeting and trading film, and and now it's just a click of a button. It's so much easier. These young guys have no idea. I can remember lining the field with lime before we had turf. We didn't have paint. I had to bag lime and put in a liner. So you've not really coached until you've lined the field. And I had to do it every home game of Friday. For 9 years each start, I had to line the field, and I did some in Martinsburg. So, but anyway, times have changed, and it's definitely for the better. I mean, it's a good thing what we have.
How big is your VHS tape collection that you still have? How big is it?
I've got 4 big Tucker totes full of stuff of East Hardy. I don't know if it's still any good. I had all the Martinsburg stuff for years until we went to the DVDs, and I've got a bunch of those. But I had some of them converted over to digital, but it's so expensive to do. So it's stuff sitting in my basement in a Tucker tote, and I have no idea if it's still any good or not. But there's a bunch of it there.
I was going to say, you talk about going back to the old days. That's the old days right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and then trying to make highlight tapes and splice this stuff together. And it was, I had a stack of VCRs, about 8 of them to make copies, and now everything's click of a button. It makes it really nice. Unfortunately, I have to have young guys around me to show me how to operate this stuff because take me in technology. I struggle at times, so I got to have these young guys around to, do the stuff for me.
Now that can be true. That cannot be true. You're Coach Walker. You're able to do anything.
Oh yeah, I wish that were true. I wish it.
Oh, okay. So a couple more. And looking at high school football in West Virginia, you've been able to be away from it now for a few years. How much attention have you been paying? How much attention have you paid to high school football and how much it may have changed or whatnot since you've left?
I don't know that it's changed. I mean, I don't know if it's changed much in 2 years. I've noticed in West Virginia, I think there's some really good coaches in West Virginia. First, let me say that I think there's some really good coaches in West Virginia. The problem is the state where there's not a lot of population. The level of, I mean, if you're a good player, you're a good player. I don't care where you're at. But the thing I've noticed is when there's not a lot of numbers and the competition's not level. So you've got the upper echelon like Martinsburg or, in AA, you got, Bluefield, Independence, Fairmont. I mean, you've got guys that dominate their division. But for the most part, it becomes a numbers game. There's just not a lot of players, and it's hard to conduct practice in a good way. And I don't think kids get enough competition. I think competition is key. If you can't compete in practice, you're not going to get better. So, and competition either makes you better or you run away from it. And I think you see a lot of both. So, and that's a good thing we had at Martinsburg. So we had guys, our twos would start for a lot of other people because they had to compete every day in practice. And our ones, if they didn't work hard, then a two would be a one pretty quick. So, and a lot of people don't have that luxury. I think they did maybe 30 years ago, but I think we're losing population. I think it's hurting all of our athletic events and sports here.
And lastly, I'll end on this note. Do you miss the Friday night lights?
I do. I miss interacting with students. I mean, as an administrator, even kids that didn't play football. I miss interacting with the students and young people. And I had a really good relationship with a lot of kids at the school. And I just miss that. Friday night is special. Like I said, I really enjoy what I'm doing now, but there is an aspect of that I do miss. Just seeing people grow and see how they mature. I mean, it happens at this level as well, but it's different. But there's nothing like a Friday night football game. It's fun and people enjoy it. And you get to college, it's a player. It's a job. You have to work and you put in a lot of days and it's a grind.
Well, Coach Walker, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you and good luck next season.
Thank you very much. And anything I could ever do for you, don't hesitate.
I appreciate that, Coach. Thank you.
Take care.
Yes, sir. That will conclude episode 4 of West Virginia Sideline Talk with our terrific guest, and I should also say successful guest, Coach Dave Walker, former Martinsburg head coach, current Concord head coach as well. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast and more. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. And I will catch you all next time on episode 5 of West Virginia Sideline Talk.